Thank you everybody for coming out today on this wonderful Saturday here at Blaine Art Museum. We're so thankful to see familiar faces along with new faces. I think it's really great to see everyone here. A couple reminders, if you want to know what's happening at the Blaine Art Museum, you always can follow us on Facebook. We do a lot of things on Facebook. Also, you can become a member. You get sent postcards and publications about everything that's happening here at the museum as well throughout the year. And if you're interested in membership, there's a couple different ways of getting involved that way. You can go online to it, or we can get you set up before you leave here today. So just let us know if that's something that interests you, and we'll get you all set up with that. Also, too, we record all of our talks and things, and so we have a YouTube channel. And so if you want to hear this wonderful talk or just see my beautiful face again, you can always go onto YouTube and see it there as well. So with that, I will briefly introduce the artists that the work is represented here in the gallery, and we're really thankful to have both Robert Craig and Phillip Chen here as part of the exhibit cycle this year. I first got introduced to both Robert and Bill, I think it was back in 2007 when I worked at Drake for that year. So at the time, Robert was the department head of the art department there, and Phil, I think we went out for lunch at least one time, I remember, making Chinese restaurant. Always. Yeah, they were really, really delicious, actually, I remember. And then I tried to keep in contact with both Robert and Phil throughout the years. You know, we have a sculpture outside on the grounds of Robert's, and hopefully we can, you know, continue to collect and obtain works by both of these amazing artists. And so with that, I will turn it over to them, and then they can tell you more, and then we'll just kind of go from there. So let's welcome both Robert and Phillip.
I think before Phil and I were talking about this, I think it's a nice group. I think, you know, what we would prefer is to try to get a conversation going rather than us speaking independently so much. But before we get started, I want to thank Eric for, this was Eric's idea. This was an invitational show to bring our works together. This is the first time that Phil and I have shown our works this extensively together, other than some works at faculty shows at Drake. But I want to thank Eric for inviting us, and I also want to thank Lenore Metrick-Chen for writing the introductory essay that is in the catalog materials, that are the gallery materials that you have. So.
We've known each other for 30 years. I came to Drake in '95. And this is the first time we've shown together, and it's a really great opportunity to see an overview of Robert's work in relation to mine, and just to have a chance in a new space, what we've never shown before, to try to realize what some of the concepts and feelings are that our individual bodies of work and how they interrelate with each other, two bodies of work. I think we weren't sure quite what was going to happen. We put the work up pretty quickly, and it felt right. And it felt like the two bodies of work dialogue well with one another. Maybe that's what we should talk about, is why do they belong together? How are they like and not alike, in other words?
Before you do that,
Yes.
who did what?
The sculptures are mine.
Okay.
The work on the floor is mine. The work on the wall is Philip's, except with the exception of that piece over there in the corner.
I'm sorry.
Oh, that's a good question.
So the paintings and the prints are mine. And so the works under glass over there are woodcuts, and everything else is painted, oil on panel. So with a lot of thought. I wish you could hear a recording of Lenore and Robert and I hashing out what to title the show. But we're very subtle with landscape-interval.
Well, I can start.
Yeah, please.
Because one of the things probably you all feel, if you didn't really think about it per se, there's no people. And so often paintings, sculptures refer to the human figure. So why? It's a big question. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, you know, a word I keep thinking about when I come up here and look at the word is trace or traces. And what I was interested in, I think this comes through in some of Phil's work too, is that there's a record of some sort of activity, and that could be human interference or it could be natural interference, but it's something that is in the past, that has occurred, that it's a kind of a remembrance or a memory of past events. And I think for me, the first time that I sort of experienced this was as a child, walking through hedgerows. Many of you know what hedgerows are. They're planted between fields for windbreaks and erosion control and so forth. But they also become these repositories for everything that is obsolete. It gets sort of discarded in those. So I remember vividly walking through those and encountering objects and compilations of things, assemblage of things that were contrasting parts. They didn't relate to each other, but they became sort of one through time, through weather, and they became these sort of new entities. So there was already this place that was sort of absent of much, you know, there had been activity, but no longer there was any activity present.
So you can make works that include ideas about human presence without actually representing a bodily human. Go back here. I think when I made this series of paintings, I was very influenced by 19th century photography. And I was interested in a period of the history of photography circa 1860 in particular, because in 1860 the albumin print, for some of you who know the history of photography, was prevalent. And if you look at old albumin prints, many of them are faded. And they're very, very fugitive looking. And there was something about that formal quality that influenced the palette that you see here. Every time I do a show and these works are reproduced, I tell the director or the editor of the book or whatever, these reproductions are correct. Contrast and value are correct. Everybody thinks that the reproductions are messed up, and they're not. They were deliberately made in reference to faded albumin prints. In the year 1860, that was the last year in American history where domestic output, economically, agricultural output and industrial output were equal. That was the balance point. So I've deliberately, in this series, gone back to an interval, a period in time where it wasn't certain what was going to happen. There was a lot of possibility at that fulcrum, lots of possibility. And so in a way, you know, it's like making paintings about a moment where, a moment of possibility. And yeah.
Can I ask one other question?
Mm-hmm.
Like, take this painting here, for instance. Could you unpack it. I always like it when an artist
Well,
doesn't mind saying
well,
what it was going to
you
mean.
know, 1860 was, it was called the Middle Landscape. The Middle Landscape, and I did a painting called the Middle Landscape. John is right in front of it. And the Middle Landscape was the ideal term for the, quote, perfect marriage. This is what you're, a marriage of agrarianism and pastoralism and industry. There was still a hope in 1860 that this will all work out and all will be well. You know, so that simply is an interfacing between two possibilities. Yeah, very similar to this one. You know, that's simply a kind of a composite of two possibilities.
So it's like the railroad tracks would be,
That's called three ways. So there's the tracks, there's the opposing domestic scene, and I'll leave it to others to figure out what the third way is. It's there. It's there. There is a third way. Yeah. So there's something transient about the paintings, and perhaps you see there's a kind of ephemeral, transient quality about Robert's sculptures, even though they're made of metal. And that's a remarkable thing about Robert's work, I think, is that he's taking these durable metals and he's creating works that have a kind of fugitive, transient fluidity about them, which is quite a metaphysical trick or accomplishment.
I have a question about the woodblock prints. When I think of woodblock prints, particularly the Japanese prints, I'm looking at bold colors, superimposed, making a scene, and these are so subtle. And so, how many blocks are you using in these?
The one in the middle?
How are you registering the colors so they come out so subtle?
The one in the middle is about 23 blocks. But they were averaging 16. But the one in the middle was my most intensive woodcut ever. And that required extra work.
That's just astonishing.
And it's pin registration. It's just pinning paper to a registration board, locking the block into a registration board and pinning the paper to the board.
Okay.
So it's literally pinpoint registration. Yeah.
Are they reduction prints?
No. Every printing is a separately carved block. And I had it in mind that one day I would take those blocks and change the palette and do a different edition. Never gotten there. It's an option. Yeah. So, some of the key terms that we've been talking about so far in terms of this question about why do these works belong together, I think along with the concepts of time and interval, words like transience, fluidity, change, possibility.
I find your comment about the hedgerow very interesting because those three could certainly be a farm fence with stuff crammed against it, how it washes out.
Yeah, those were earlier pieces, and that representational reference was more clear in those than I think some of the later ones. But like any idea, I mean that was sort of my starting point. But then I started to think more broadly about how contrasting elements come together and why they come together, and so I think they became. Some of the references became more abstract as I went along, but early on when I started the work, I did want to have that association that familiar association that so many people have had.
My other question is, like especially this one on the left, right? be, you're right, this one on the corner, not the hedgerow one.
Yeah.
It looks like it could be a weather vane. Do they move?
They don't move, but the implied movement that you're sensing, it was something that I thought about, and that they have an implied movement, and also I wanted them to suggest an implied event, an occurrence as well. So, but the horizontal and the vertical emphasis, those were things that were important to me as making a sense of movement. I wanted those references to be, related to the landscape, both natural and urban landscape. Yeah.
I have a question for both of you, separate ones. So, was the prints and the paintings, are some of those images actually taken from photographs that you?
None of them are taken.
They're all from here.
They're all, yeah,
From
they're all,
memory?
not memory. They're sketched.
Oh, so you went and saw that and then you?
No, they're just sketched.
I created ideas, I get it.
Yeah, you just make up an image and
Yeah.
that's graphite on paper that gets refined.
Okay.
It's a process of evolution to the point
It
where,
looks photographic.
Yeah.
Yeah, very nice.
yeah, that was the point.
And then with the architecture, the sculptures, once you got going, did you etch any ideas down, or you just kept moving with what you felt was working, so you applied more? Because
Yeah.
I see some, in these front two, number 6 and 7, I see warriors.
Yeah.
Sound effects, excuse me, but how did you keep that idea going? Did you draw it, write some sketch?
No, these pieces are made much more directly than like the large scale work that's outside, which is more of a convergent process of planning and drawing scale drawings and making scale models and so forth. So they're very planned out, and that has to do a lot with cost and time. That I need to have a pretty definite plan before I commit to making them. But these pieces are evolved much more directly. If I made sketches, and sometimes I did, they were very rough sort of sketches, never anything finished. And so a lot of what happened in the making process. So
Solid art material?
no.
You might purchase a lot of this stuff.
This is a good question. Well, it's all made. It's all fabricated.
Well, I see the copper. Is it a copper?
No, that's steel, but it's got a kind of a copper color on it that you're seeing. So, but that's a good question. No, I rarely use found objects. The only time that I use found materials are on the steel and stone pieces that are these column pieces that have the rocks incorporated, and on the shelf piece on the wall there. But otherwise, everything is fabricated. So everything you see was either sheet metal to begin with, and it was cut and fabricated into these forms.
Well, the cement, right? That cement, we can't touch.
Yeah,
I can't touch if I wanted to.
Yeah, those are cast elements. The rock is not a true rock, and these are cast elements.
It's not a real rock.
I'd like to ask about this piece here, sort of in the back center. It seems so different from everything else. These do give you the impression of a jumble of farm machinery that you might find in a field, where this has a completely different texture and weight to it. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think you're right. We actually talked about whether to keep this in the show or to remove it, but I decided I wanted to keep it because it is kind of an anchor piece for me, and that this is the earliest piece in the show. I did this when I was teaching at the University of Connecticut Stores, and I was teaching all metalworking classes. That's what I was hired to do there, and so it started as a teaching demonstration. But it's similar in the others in that this was an early thinking about composite things. And in this case, I was thinking about how found things are often assembled with best intentions, but they are assembled incorrectly. Parts that belong to other things are put together, and they develop this thing that seems correct, but in the end it turns out to not be correct. So that, again, this sort of disparate sort of elements sort of brought together in something that's familiar looking and might seem correct in some ways, but it's not. So.
I'm glad that you brought it. It's a nice, it really sets off the rest of the articles.
Thank you.
So in high school, did you take like the industrial textiles and then decide that you wanted to go into art?
No, I didn't. I learned how to weld in college in a beginning sculpture class.
High school stuff?
No.
Really?
No, my school didn't offer that kind of opportunity. So my interest in metal and welding came from my beginning sculpture class that I took. And I really like the material because of that it offers a certain amount of resistance, and that works well for me, but it's also extremely malleable and versatile. So and also I like its relationship to the industrial world. Some of the history of the material, I think, helps with some of the ideas that I'm
Then like you have a workshop that you work out of and do.
I'm sorry, what was that?
At home, do you have your own workshop and stuff and sell and stuff?
Yeah, I have a workspace that I built behind my house.
Do you have a hydraulic press to bend metal, sheet metal?
No, that'd be nice, but no, I don't. Sometimes for like the larger scale work, like some of the elements in the piece outside, I take to fabrication shops that have some of that equipment. So if I need something large rolled or something like that, but works like this, they can all be done by hand. It's not. They refer to this as mild steel, and the reason for that is it's pretty soft. You can, it doesn't, it'll conform to what you want without too much.
How thick is the steel on that?
16 gauge.
Are they as heavy as they look?
No, they're not very heavy. So these pieces aren't very heavy. They're hollow. They're hollow.
Can I ask a question to the audience? I just wonder, since I'm going back to my original thought about there not being a person in it, but when you come and look at the artwork, you are the person. And I just wondered if any of you have any, like the experience of coming upon these sculptures or paintings, how that affected you. Did you feel like you were encountering something, or did you feel like you were just standing back looking? In other words, is it just a visual experience, or do you feel more like you're in a different place? I know everyone's answer would be different, but I'm just curious.
Well, I told Robert and Phil when they first finished setting it up when he came in here, it's like, walking through the sculptures, I did say it kind of has the feeling of walking through a crowd of people. But then at the same time, I said, it's like, but it also feels like I'm walking through a forest, and these become vegetation that I'm kind of exploring just on how they set things up. And so I had the experience where both the person in and amongst these things, but also I saw them as people too that I could engage with. And so that was my first initial experience when they got it all set up and they came in here. And I just kind of meandered around. I love that kind of approach of just meandering, and you discover new parts of the sculptures. And some of my favorite things to do since the show's been up here is kind of position myself where I'm looking through one of Robert's sculptures to the paintings behind, and finding these like gorgeous visual connections and relationships that I think are just amazing. And one reason why I really wanted to bring the work together, because I think it would have talked exactly how I felt when I saw them. So that's the experience I had right after we had it set up. So
The sculptures kind of made me dizzy for some reason. But then some of the paintings and stuff, I could see myself walking on the bridge in this house over here. But I don't know what disturbed me about the sculpture. They just did.
They exist in reality.
So they affected you physically?
All of those.
Yeah, it just
are
kind of
things
made me dizzy for some reason. I don't know if it's
that
because
never exist.
it was so different, so
Or could be constructed.
big,
But
so
never be followed.
I don't know.
Well, there is a lot of precarious balance in the work and a lot of light movement, so I can understand why you might react that way. And that's, you know, the precariousness was intentional. Again, it has to do with these kinds of compilations or composite sort of forms that are created, and oftentimes they are very fragile, you know, and maybe don't exist for very long before they topple over.
And just the wires, I didn't have anything to hang on to. It was like falling, you know.
So I have a question. Both of you came to a similar resolution from a similar content area. And these are older works, older bodies of work. Do you see the same thing happening in more current works where you're finding solutions that run a line with each other?
I think in my well, first of all, my current work looks totally different from this work.
Sure.
Most people would not know that the same person made this body and these bodies and works and what I've been doing in the last 20 years. But there is a relationship. There's still a conceptual connection between these works and what I'm doing now. And I think the first thing I can say to answer that is that it has something to do with the current work. People have said seems to float. That nothing is really anchored. That nothing is really that stable in my current work. It's true. I don't use a horizon. This is absolutely the last body of work I did that relied on a horizon. And so now I'm doing works that really are very free-floating. They're like ghostly hoverings, you know. And when I look back at these paintings, they also have a kind of seeming lack of permanence. You know, they're not. They seem like they're on their way somewhere, right? Something's going to change, or they'll assume a different state of being.
Yeah, tense call.
Yeah. But I think, you know, it's just immediately, and I think immediately that's the best answer I can give right now.
I think I took your question a little differently. I thought you were asking if we saw similarities in each other's work.
Yeah, that was where it occurs.
Oh,
I think
They see similar solutions in these.
Yeah, I think to answer your question to that is in terms of, a lot of people aren't familiar with this work. I haven't shown it in some time, and are more familiar with the outdoor work I do. And I think maybe one of the connections between both our current body of work is that we're both very interested in objects and in the use of objects as a point of departure for abstraction. And because that's the focus of my larger scale work, is it always starts with a certain set of objects that I've selected and then begin to abstract from. But some of the and a lot of the history of the object and the associations, cultural associations, so forth, to those objects become things that I'm considering as I'm making them. And I think that's
That's
true.
Yeah, that is true.
Phil's
Right.
work.
Right. And in making the images, there's the search for objects or the appropriate thing is just never predictable. It's just, who knows? It could be happenstance that you see something and you retrieve it and use it. I've got, oh, it's almost shameful if you saw my place. It's just a mess. There's these things everywhere, and sometimes something will insinuate itself into a work, but some things have been there for 30 years and I've never even considered using them. You know what I mean? It's an interesting process of selection and how things are utilized or not.
And we've been involved particularly in preliminary things in terms of making our own work. I mean, I have objects that Phil and Lenore have given me that I've utilized. I remember one time Phil calling me up and saying, "Do you have a such and such pick? I need a pick for a print that I'm doing," and I did happen to have it and so forth. So there's some ongoing sort of conversations about making things and so forth can happen as well.
Have you guys ever thought intentionally like collaborating on a single thing?
Well, Lenore proposed to Drake, and it just dropped like a lead weight. Lenore proposed that Drake was a significant site to the black officers training for World War as combatants in World War I. They trained at Fort Des Moines, and they had a celebration, a graduation celebration at the Drake Stadium, where these black officers assembled and sang and celebrated their imminent embarkation to France late in the war. And it was such an important thing that happened at Drake, and quite obscure. They were called the White Sparrows. And Lenore proposed that Rob and I do a memorial, sculptural memorial. So that never happened. That would have been nice.
Could have been interesting. I think.
Yeah, it would have been interesting. We never got to the stage of actually sitting down, brainstorming. I'm sure we would have come up with something great.
I'm sure you would.
So it dropped off because of you and not the administration? Is that what you're saying?
And there was never enough interest shown in the idea to get it off the ground.
Yeah, they came up with an alternative
Not
plan.
by us, but by us.
The alternative plan, I know I'm not going to say it on camera. I'm not going to incriminate myself. But it was an atrocity.
I have a question about collage. And so, Rob, you talked a little bit about bringing what might seem disparate things together. But I'm also interested in that in this series as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, where you see affinity or not with thinking about collage in the sense of making something out of parts that didn't start with each other.
Yeah, I think the simplest way to answer that is to actually indicate a painting where there was material culture already pre-existing the painting, and then I came upon it and incorporated it. And the one that comes to mind right away is that one. Because you see that domestic, almost that arbor, that I actually fabricated that, just because I like the form. It was just sitting around the studio. And when I came up with the idea to do a painting called The Need for Ruins, based on a book called The Necessity for Ruins, which is about decay and regrowth or progress out of decay. Ruins as a ruination as a necessary kind of cultural and artistic stage. And so So when I came up with the idea, having read the book, to do a painting called The Need for Ruins, it seemed like that arbor would be a good contrasting element.
Well, is there any other questions for Robert or Phil? You can always grab them before they leave today and drag them to your favorite work and maybe get direct answers from them. But I would like to thank you all again for coming out on this Saturday and showing your support for the museum, support for two amazing regional artists as Robert and Phil are. And I encourage you to keep attending and supporting the Blandon and all local and regional artists as much as possible. I think it's really, really important that we show that we care and love and appreciate the people that are really making really beautiful and amazing things. And so thank you again. Follow us on Facebook. Become a member if you're not. And like I say, you can watch this again on YouTube, but give me about a week or so, and it'll be on there. So why don't we give a round of applause for both